All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here at MFC 2016. Caryn and I are going to be presenting on pain management for IT operations. We really have two types of presentation here. We have the first part, which will be structured around strategy and focus. And then Caryn will come up and she'll talk a little bit more about tactical approaches on how to manage and deal with IT operation-related issues. My name is John Mirando. I work with the strategy and advisory services with MobileIron. I've been in mobile about 15 years, so I've been basically from when we started with small CE embedded apps over satellite communication up to where we are today. I think I have one of the most exciting jobs here at MobileIron because I get to work with our customers and set a vision and work on how they get to that point in their mobile journey. Caryn?
Hi, my name is Caryn Nelson, and I work in professional services as a resident consultant, and I provide staff augmentation services, feature implementation, helping companies from a transitional state to a fully functional production state. Thanks, John.
So we're going to start off with a little bit of an analogy here. We all like to talk in generalized and analogy states. And I've got a picture of a green space, a square here, and if you can think about how this may have come to be, maybe a landscape architect might have presented their designs and said, I've laid this out to make the best use of the area. We've got our walkways around the square. We've got one down the middle so that people can cut across. And over in the corner, we put a bus stop so that a little bit offset from the road, just so that when the buses stop, we're not blocking traffic for the other areas. Now, putting an IT or a mobility spin on this, what I see is mobile's impact on traditional IT process and how we deliver and use technology. Your traditional processes being, I had to go to the office, I had to go go to a lab somewhere and use certain systems or whatnot and get connected to our environment in order to deliver the product or service or that bus stop over on the other side. And then mobility comes, and now I have a shortcut there. I can do the same job, I can do the same functions, I can do it quicker, easier, and more efficiently with tools that I like to use versus maybe a green screen app or something that I wasn't really comfortable using before. So this presentation, the first part, we're going to talk about strategy and kind of how that mobile paradigm shifts and how we need to look at how we deliver technology, leverage technology, and what we're selling for our users to use. So you have several choices here. In some cases it's already happened, in some cases in the process of happening, depending on where you are in your own mobile journey. It's either going to be by you, meaning you're going to be ushering that in, you're bringing that technology, you're bringing in that innovation into your organization with you, which is one of the better ways to do it, and you will talk about that later in the slides, but just collaborating amongst your peers and looking at the technology that's available and how you can change and improve process, or it's going to happen to you. And in some cases in an operations world, things have come to your lap where you're now supporting solutions that were done and started outside of the breadth of IT, because that's in some cases the shadow IT world, and that's where things had started just because people were trying to get things done. They were trying to use tools that they wanted to in order to get there. So we're going to talk more about strategy. What I want to do is start off with kind of a throwback a little bit here. I'm going to pull up a slide here. This campaign from Apple started about 20 years ago. And really the whole Think Different campaign kind of brought about, if you remember some of the ads that came around, some of the renegades, some of the subculture around IT. We're going to do it our way because we do it better. Or we're going to do it our way just because I don't like what you're doing and I found something easier to do. So this is really kind of a tremendous foresight when you think about it. And then this is about 1997 that this came out. And then about 10 years after that, 2007, is when the first iPhone came out. So now, they started this on the consumer side. They started talking about doing things differently. Things just work. You just plug it in, you go, you get that. You remember the old iMacs, the different colors, you plugged it in, you fire it up and you start working. Well, now the iPhone came along, and that made it a reality for more people, and even it made it a reality to provide applications that were very intuitive, that didn't require any training. You just launch it and use it. How many people in here have younger children that use their iPhone or their Android devices that can just start using it and you don't have to tell them how? I mean, you might have to give them the passcode, but that only happens once too, because then they can get in after that, right? So really this underscores this frames what we're going to talk about in the first half of this presentation. And what we see now in the enterprise space is that a lot of initiatives are still very tactical in nature. You're catching up, you're always catching up. There's always a new application coming in, there's always a new tool, there's a new cloud service out there that's coming, and you're always catching up and you're trying to get it all under wraps, but you have to be focused on a deliverable. You have a timeline in front of you, and you're laser focused, and you're trying to hit that mark. And ultimately, all these initiatives are very tactical in nature. We'd like it to be strategic, but they're very tactical in nature because you've got deliverables. And it's really difficult to step back and away from it because, as we talked a little bit earlier in the keynote, there's the whole notion of business velocity and how quickly we can get there and how nimble we can be. Now, mobile enables speed, but the nimbleness comes from scale. And how do you scale? You can't scale when you have fragmented API environments. You don't have a unified service bus, or maybe you're using broker or other tools to kind of become the gateway between your infrastructure and your data, the stuff you're trying to protect, and the multitude of applications that are being asked for or even brought into your organization by different teams within the environment. So what do you do? What do you change this? Like, where do we want to be? Well, the nirvana in a mobile-first environment is going to be everybody's collaborative working together. So you have all of your, whether it be an architecture team or maybe a center of excellence team, where you've got representation from all the business units, and they're talking and working together amongst themselves about, these are initiatives that we're trying to do. This is how we want to do that. This is the value we're gaining. And by the way, when you have the other people at the table, these are the opportunities that you gain from what they're capturing and bringing into your other applications. So if you think of a sales cycle, you have your marketing team promoting and sending out, different promotional opportunities for customers to purchase product or a service, and the sales teams that go out and do that and they capture information from the customer, maybe electronic contract or whatnot, and then you have your delivery or your implementation or service teams that go out and deliver that. Now, there's a tremendous amount of information captured across there, but a lot of times, and this has gotten much better, but a lot of times what you see is that you're entering those people are providing that same information in each step of that cycle versus having a continuous process, soup to nuts, that allows the information to flow across. And that's a result of the fact that you've got different decision makers, you've got some fragmentation in that space that doesn't collaborate in order to deliver mobile as an experience versus mobile as traditional IT to basically, as we talked earlier, porting what you do now to mobile, not porting what you do now to solving a problem with the mobile experience. The goal ultimately is to make your initiative strategic. Difficult balance, because again, we talked about speed and focus and how you have to hit certain marks, but you're working towards strategy, and how do we underscore a mobile strategy that allows us to get where we want to go, but do it in a manageable manner and as well as being scalable when we get there. But there's a multitude of problems in here, and when I look at this slide, the way I can think to represent it here is you've got different fragments of what's going on here. So in the top left, you've got that solid street that's still coming through, and that could be something like procurement processing. So mobile hasn't disrupted that so much, other than maybe how you go about getting approvals and making your procurements. That process, those channels are still largely the same. And then if you come down to maybe the middle there, you see all the broken pieces in the middle. That could be your telecom teams. Telecom teams in a mobile world, typically they're used to deploying feature phones out to your employees, but now they're having to deploy smartphones out. Well, then where does that line cross with your desktop operating teams or your software teams that are deploying applications for collaboration and whatnot? So those lines become blurry. So their processes aren't quite as simple or quite as congruent as they were before. And then, of course, down through the bottom, I think of security. So security, traditional perimeter model of securing data, has now gone to, as I mentioned earlier, logical, or focusing on the data itself, not the physical devices that are in there. So now they've got not only the device and the multitude of devices that are out there, but now you've got cloud service, and now you've got third-party applications. And what third-party applications provide enough control that will let you use them, and what third-party applications are gone here today, gone tomorrow. So the channels are very fragmented, and that was the point of that, is that there's a lot of fragmentation in that space. More so, not as bad as Android, but there's definitely a lot of fragmentation in the channels associated with supporting mobile. So what do you do there? It seems like an impossible state, right? There's nowhere to go from here. How do we even get there? But there is possibility. There's definitely ways of getting there, and it takes a lot of work. MCOE, the concept of a mobile center of excellence, and it could be an architecture council, it could be any number, whatever you want to call it. It could just be a small group that starts up and just starts to talk about the type of problems that they're running into. Is you use those type of initiatives to start bridging gaps. So how do we start taking those fragmented pieces and start bringing them together? Security is having challenges because they're having to adapt to a mobile landscape. Well, you start bringing them in, you start pulling them into your process, you start to try and become the trusted advisor, in a sense, and developing the technology solutions with them. So they start to learn and they start to be able to come along that same mobile journey with you. And your goal is really ultimately, you want to own it before it owns you. And then even if you are in it, it's an own you state right now, it's totally possible to change it. And that's the other opportunity you have in mobility. Because it changes so frequently, there's always an opportunity to create a pivot point. And that pivot point could be where you start to plug in and you start to get the organization to start turning and start looking towards you as their trusted advisor. Queensland mentioned earlier that the very first app they delivered was very minimal functionality, but nobody wanted to give it back because they got a taste of what was coming. They got a taste of, hey, you know what, this is going to be useful. I don't have to use the radio so much, or I don't have to do whatever that other initiative is. What else do you have for me? It changes the paradigm from me trying to find a way or reverse engineer a way back into getting my job done quicker and easier with something that I want to use, to one where I know it's coming, and now I'm going to come back and now I'm going to help IT bring it forward. So a lot of this is grassroots right now, and it's not, we mentioned that it's really difficult to do. It's a ground up effort. It's education, it's pushing, it's managing up. You're in operations roles, many of you are in a great position to start to see the fragmentation, the type of initiatives that are coming down the pipe. You might be on a network team, you might be on a security team, maybe you're in telecom, whichever areas you're in, you start to see what some of these teams are trying to do, and you can start bridging the gaps between the processes that are going on. You start bridging the gaps between your peers, literally, and breaking down the traditional silos that you have in a lot of organizations. And this is another good slide. This is what I like to show to kind of represent what the user experience portion of it is. The very top of this, talking about the best tools for the job and getting your job done, quickly and easily. The very tip of that iceberg, that's the only part that the users are concerned with. That's the only part that creates, or that's the seed that creates all the disruption that we're seeing. Because if I can submit an expense report off my phone versus having to open my laptop, connect to my VPN, log into Oracle Financials or whatever tool you're using, and then scanning and doing all these other stuff, if I can just pull out my phone, take a few pictures, categorize, submit that expense, that's a much easier user experience. And that's the tool that I want, because the tool is not in my way of doing my job. If my job is to go and talk to customers and meet and greet, sell products and services, I don't want to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours doing my expenses or my timesheets when I get back. I just want to launch an app, maybe on a train or a plane ride to and from, and just finish it and be done with it in 2 minutes. So that's the piece that's what the customers are concerned about. But there's a whole lot that goes into it. This is the complexity. There's the skeleton, the wireframe. So this says wireframes, but think of that as like your API level. You don't want fragmented API levels, because you don't want 7 different providers giving you APIs to do something across different business units, because now you've got a scale issue. You can't manage that. And the structure, the data, the underlying data, what data is relevant, what data is not relevant, and the scope, how are you securing who sees what data and who does, how are you managing how that goes away? And the underpinning for all of that is really the strategy. And the strategy part, and we're not talking like a 5-year, 10-year strategy. I think we're all pretty well aware that that's not going to happen. But we're talking like, maybe in the beginning, like 3 months, 6 months, 9, 18, 2 years at most, just looking at where you want to go, what technology makes sense to you, and then breaking that down into tactical chunks and delivering consumable pieces along the way to start gaining the trust and start spinning and create that pivot point within your organization to become the trusted advisor. So this is something we do awesome. And this is what we were talking about earlier when we said, when people go mobile, the very first notion they think about is, oh great, I'm going to take this, this Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to put it on a mobile device and let you use it. Now the screen is about, a third or a tenth the size of what that screen had before. And if you're a salesperson trying to capture leads in there, it's just not going to work. But the key is the creativity aspect of this is taking that, what was once complicated process, and making it awesomely simple. Not just basically simple, but making it awesomely simple. And there's a lot of creativity that goes into that, and a think different paradigm that says, we're not going to do it the way we've always done it before. We're going to do it a new way. We don't know what that new way is, but we know that we can't keep perpetuating what we were doing before, because the whole experience is different. The approach to delivering the technology is different. There's expectations from a consumer perspective that have bled over into traditional IT. So what do? Well, you start to sell what's possible, what the destination is for the user. Here's your experience. Here's the experience you want. You want to be, you want to be out here. You want to look out on the water. But it's not. It's really what's in here is the simplicity of it. It's clean. It's, there's not. Their business logic doesn't go away. the rules don't go away. Those all lie below the surface on that iceberg. They get, the complication is still there, so IT jobs don't get any easier, and that's what some people get concerned about when we come in and we start talking about, oh, everything's going to be easier. Well, it's going to be easier for the user. The experience is going to change. It becomes a more mobile experience for the user, but the IT job, if anything, will become more complicated because you're starting to have to encapsulate and rethink and reform the processes that are underneath that application going forward. So it's a destination thing. It's not about what you're doing, it's about how they're doing it. Why is it relevant to them? Why are they going to like it? And it's solving a problem they don't know they have. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. But you're going to be there along the way, you're going to support them. So you may have BYOD programs, you may have COPE programs, you may have a number of the programs, but you have to provide resources out there so that they can start to feel comfortable turning to your teams and your IT infrastructure teams as a support. The BYOD is very interesting because you open that up and then everybody's like, well, what device can I get? What tablets can I use? They don't need to be wide open. You can provide structure around that and guidance around that very much like the application I mentioned earlier, when something is not allowed, there's a tangible reason that's associated with it, and you're open and you're transparent about that communication, and you're engaging that user or that environment. And you're looking ultimately to enable technology transparency. We talked about the timesheet concept earlier. If you today have to launch an application on a laptop, make a VPN connection in order to log in and do all your timesheets versus pulling out your phone and having an application that creates a tunnel into back-end infrastructure and allows you to do the same thing in minutes, that transparency is what's important to the user. Again, they're just that tip of the iceberg. They're not really concerned with how you secure the data, or the security guys are clearly, but the typical user, a sales rep, or maybe a medical professional that's using the applications, they're not concerned with what's going on, what the inner nuts and bolts are. They just try to get their job done, and that's the least part. That's not their core competency. Their core competency is doing whatever their service or skill is, not logging the hours or tracking and doing what they're doing on the other side of that. So we're seeing the mobile first be that blend between traditional, or the blue side, of this is how you're going to do your job, to the new, or the mobile side, if you will, of I found these apps, they're great, they're easy to use, I can just copy this into my cloud service and I can work on it whenever I want to. We're trying to blend those two things together. We're trying to manage, you're trying to pivot and start to look at things from the user experience, focusing on what that experience is, what that destination is to the user. But there is a couple caveats. It's on your terms, and that's one of the key things here. We talk about MobileIron as a platform offering choice. We're providing capabilities and strategy for how you can use our technology to, one, enable choice and let them use what services they want, but it's on your terms because you're able to maintain a security posture that keeps you comfortable with your data and lets you sleep in it. Communication is really the underlying pinnacle of this whole piece right here. Transparency, and actively engaging, not hiding behind it. In the past, OS updates or maybe application updates, they didn't happen with the frequency that they do now, and technology change didn't happen with the frequency that it does now. And what you'll find is that, the more open you are, and maybe that would be, maybe you do lunch and learns, or maybe you're just doing like information booths, or maybe it's a newsletter that's not a traditional IT newsletter, and how do I frame that best? But from a marketing point of view, and starting to basically advertise IT services and do things in a manner that's not that's more interesting to the tip of the iceberg people that are doing it. They don't want to know the details, but they need to know highlights. Like an example, I did an Office 365 deployment with my last employer, and we had to move everybody over to Office 365 and the new 2016 applications. That's very disruptive because everybody gets comfortable in their spreadsheet, everybody gets comfortable in Access and all the stuff that they've built and all the formulas and everything that they've got going on there. But we had to convert them and we had to get them going over to the other side. So how do we do that? Well, we didn't tell them, we didn't take the approach that said, we're deploying Office 365, 2013 is going to come out, here's the wave schedule. We did give them all that transparency, we gave them the schedule and when it's coming. But what we did with that is we started to communicate the benefits, the highlights, like this is why we're doing it. These are, you're going to be able to work on it wherever you are with whatever device you have when you want to do it. You've got cloud storage, you've got all these nice real high level benefits and these modern benefits that users have come to expect from the consumer side. So you change your communication model. And your other opportunity to start creating a pivot and starting getting in front of communications is really around different events specifically in mobile. So we have 4 quarters up here, and you'll have about 8 releases almost. You have the wearable upgrades that happen in the early part of the year, followed by new tablets and smartphones. And then you'll have another wearable update because the new tablets and smartphones enabled some other feature that wasn't available in the previous. And then you've got a key one here, especially this is I like to focus on this one a little bit, the beta operating systems for anyone that has in-house apps or third-party developed apps. This is a really key one here because this is your opportunity to get ahead of the next release, which is going to come in September, where people are going to upgrade their device. I mean, that's just what's going to happen. That's the reality of mobile today. So you have this 3-month period to try and get ahead of that. But not many people take that opportunity. A lot of these app vendors still feel like they're in control of their destiny, and they say, well, I didn't get that far yet, so you can't upgrade just yet. Well, half my fleet is already upgraded, and we can't go back. So when are you going to get there? So this is an important one. There's an app management class, session too that you might want to look at. But relationships with these people, whether they be internal or third party, having strategy around how are you going to meet the cadence of release as they come out. What do you do? What's the n minus what? What's your version strategy? And then of course smartphones and the new OS is released. And then the tablets come right behind. Now this is the time of year where devices grow legs and screens start to break. So everybody sees that, and all of a sudden they have to buy new stuff, right? So these are, we know this is coming, we can prepare for it. Maybe it lands in a refresh cycle if we're lucky. But there are policies and stuff that you can look at how to do that. There's a number of strategies on how to mitigate that. But this is definitely the walking time of year for devices and equipment. And then of course, holidays, somebody gets a brand new Surface Pro or whatever they get over the holidays, and they come in and they immediately want to put it on their domain, and they want to start getting email, they want to start using applications. So there's a lot of events that come along, and there are a lot of opportunities for you as IT professionals to start pivoting and changing and becoming the trusted advisor and getting in front of things from a mobile perspective. So ultimately what we're doing is we're kind of going from IT to advertising in a sense, and it's kind of a simple way to describe it. You're starting to market the capabilities you have, and you're trying to show them this is what we've got. We've got the technology to do what you're doing in the background. We've already got that, and we've got a way to manage it, and we've got a way to deploy it. Here's what it'll do for you, because we're ultimately solving problems you don't know you have yet, and then here's how you get it. And we have to do it in a different manner than what we're traditionally used to. We're not force feeding anymore. We're basically having to entice. We're having to bring users into leveraging our service, leveraging our ecosystem of tools, because they have that open choice now. So we have to take and balance what the tactical need is, when you think about that focus, trying to keep up with a strategic goal. It can't be a very long, 5-year one, but it's got to be 6, 8, 9 months, 10, 18 months out there. And then taking the fragmentation and trying to keep a line of sight on where you're going with that strategy, and trying to endeavor to make that awesomely simple out of what you have now, that fragmentation. And then endeavor technology transparency. If it's not transparent, if it's not easy to use, if they have to think about it, if it's not intuitive, they're not going to use it. Your adoption is going to sink. You just have to, the user experience is the king here. And then empower possibility, deliver choice, but on your terms. We don't have to give up our security practices, our security rules. We have to change how we deliver and manage the security processes and rules, but we don't have to give them up. It can be on your terms. So with that, that's my portion of the deck here, and I'm going to turn it over to Caryn. She's going to help you think about ways of automating and freeing up the time to start looking at the strategy part. Like I said, we have to balance the tactical with the strategy. She'll give you recommendations on how we can get to a point where you can start looking at more of a strategic level of activities.
Thanks, John. So, I don't know about you all, but I was really inspired this morning by the Queensland Police and the GE presentations. And I'm envisioning that they use some of the strategies, best practices, and recommendations that we're providing to you today so that they can strategically get from where they were to where they are now. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about best practices and recommendations to help you get from where you are today and achieve some of the initiatives, the high-level initiatives that John's spoken to. So who hasn't had to think through that dilemma of the Apple ID, whether to use a personal email address or a corporate email address? Obviously, a personal or a corporate email address isn't appropriate for all situations like BYOD. So we typically recommend using a corporate email address for your Apple IDs for corporate-owned devices. So this will prevent that activation lock dilemma. So you need to be aware that the users can enable the activation lock. And in the event that the device is tied to a personal Apple ID and the users enabled that activation lock, your options are to hopefully have a support contract with Apple, but the only other option is to take the device to the Apple Store with your proof of purchase and other pieces of information seen here to have the activation lock disabled. And if you have a lot of devices, that can be pretty cumbersome. So location services is really, it should be a policy-based discussion in your organization. It's really the organization's obligation to the end user to educate them regarding device security and what are the resultant consequences for not complying with policy. Can everybody hear me okay? So we typically recommend using the native device location services for finding phones and real-time location. For iOS 7.1 and higher, the background multitasking eliminates that need for the location services for jailbreak detection. So Apple device enrollment program, going back to the activation lock, not only automates enrollment processes, but it also offers higher levels of security control, and as a supervised device, the activation lock is disabled and there's no ID to deal with. So for organizations that have higher levels of security control and corporate-owned devices, the Apple Device Enrollment Program, or DEP, may be a good solution for you. So there are lots of opportunities becoming available for adopting support for both Android and Windows 10, if that's something you've been holding off on. So I'm going to talk about a couple features for each that you may want to consider for considering adoption for Androids and Windows 10, at least for maybe your BYOD mix. So Android for Work offers a containerized solution for separating personal and work data. It also offers a simple user setup, eliminating user intervention by automating app installs, updates, and removing apps through the MobileIron console. So Android for Work also offers the ability to install apps within the container from the MobileIron console and prevent apps from being installed from unknown sources outside the container. And with Lollipop Enterprise upgrades, in addition to MobileIron Android for Work, this may be a platform that you want to consider, if you haven't already, adding into the mix. And some of the features for Windows 10 for you to consider for Windows 10 adoption. So in Windows 10, there's a unified, excuse me, a unified interface across all devices. So you eliminate the user learning curve and minimize support calls as a result of, well, I could do this on this device, but this one's different. How do I do it on this device? So Windows 10 offers a unified look and feel across all Windows 10 devices. Advanced Enterprise Data Protection gives you a way to secure business apps and determine which data you want to share. This will be available in future versions of Core. This will be supported in future versions of Core. Bulk provisioning gives IT admins a way to configure preload MDM profiles on many devices to expedite rollout, and when the user turns the device on, it's automatically enrolled using certificate-based authentication. So the question that I hear very frequently is, how do we delegate administration across geographic locations or groups of devices or users? And we have a built-in solution for this called Spaces. So Spaces gives you the ability to segment devices or users by groups and then assign roles to administrators to administer those devices. So in other words, the administrators in Australia can only administer those devices in Australia, and the administrators in China can't see any devices outside of China. So Spaces gives you a very granular way to do this. And we also have the same feature in MobileIron Cloud, but it's called Partitions. Like Spaces, labels should be created very strategically and not overused. Overuse leads to higher administrative overhead and more work for you. So the purpose of this session is to hopefully minimize administrative overhead and streamline these processes so that you can focus on the higher level initiatives. If you're new to MobileIron, Labels is the vehicle that links apps, configs, settings, policies to groups of users or devices. And a couple of the strategies that we recommend are plan ahead and think ahead when you're creating your label strategy. Standardize by using corporate standard naming conventions, intuitive naming conventions. And there are specific occasions where you want to categorize, perhaps by device platform, for example, for your App Connect or your Exchange configs, where you wanted to make that division between device platforms, so when those configs change, you're not impacting more users. You're only impacting the number of users necessary. Automate by using the advanced search to create filter labels and apply labels automatically based on LDAP groups or attributes. And long awaited, now in Core 9, we have a way to edit and clone labels. So I'm sure that many of you are very excited about that new cloning feature. We offer 3 different types of self-service portals to empower your users. And by empowering your users, you're reducing administrative overhead. So this table gives you some features and benefits of each of the portals, but I want to point out that the BYOD portal is the only customizable portal that has capability of third-party product integration with products like ServiceNow. So let's talk a little bit about maintenance and housekeeping. I saw some comments in the app about, I need to know more about maintenance and housekeeping. What can we do to automate and maintain things? So monitoring is a big focus. When your core is down, you lose the ability to administer devices, you lose access to your user portals, apps at work, things like that. So mostly administrative functionality. But you have monitoring solutions to proactively prevent your core from going down or proactively troubleshoot issues when they occur. Also new in Core 9, we have the queue activation feature. This gives you insight into various threads for expedited troubleshooting and remediation. Now, more importantly than the core going down, as I'm sure some of you have experienced, is when your Sentry goes down. So your Sentry impacts all back-end resources that are connecting or integrated with your Sentry, with the primary one being email. So we all know what happens when users aren't getting their email. We get a lot of support calls from really unhappy users. Not only, when the Sentry goes down, not only is email impacted, but also docs at work, web at work, and app tunneling if you're using any of those features. So reporting is kind of on the other end of that spectrum from monitoring, and this slide provides several use cases. Of course, it's not a comprehensive list, but some of the most common use cases and some of the reporting tools applicable to those use cases. Okay, who here has ever had an MDM cert expire? Or who here is willing to admit that? So when your MDM cert expires, that means re-enrolling all your users. But there are some really simple solutions to avoid that MDM cert from expiring. Apple sends a reminder. So what the issue that I see frequently with Apple sending that reminder is that MDM cert's been created with someone's personal Apple ID because you're probably rushing to get MobileIron set up and didn't have the time or couldn't wait for that corporate ID to be created. So when you're creating your MDM or developer certificates, create those using a corporate account so that you can then associate that corporate email address with a distribution list of your admins. That way somebody's going to get that calendar reminder that you set up in addition to Apple's reminder. And another one of my favorite topics, offboarding. This is not something that I see executed really well very frequently. So, and it can be a daunting experience because user accounts are tied to so many things these days. How do you eliminate access to all those things? How do you remember to do that? Well, the first foundation feature that I believe every organization should have is a mobile policy. This is a policy that sets up user expectations and requirements. And there are organizations that have paper documents of a mobile policy that they require users to sign before providing access to corporate resources. Well, in MobileIron, we also have an electronic way to distribute and sign terms and conditions agreements. So that's also an automated electronic way to do that. Provide administrative procedures to your admins, including how to and what accounts to disable. Automate processes using HR system integration or assemble. Revoke certificates. And don't forget to disable that iOS activation lock, because if you don't, your options are to contact that employee and ask them to disable the activation lock, which doesn't usually work too well with that terminated, disgruntled employee. Or, going back to a previous slide, you can take that device to the Apple Store with all those pieces of information that you need to have that activation lock disabled. And lastly, and my favorite part, is empower your administrators. So MobileIron Insight is a core management app that we now offer. Who gets that call from the executives outside of business hours? Maybe on the weekend, you're at your kid's game, your kid's playoff game, and you don't want to leave to run home to log in to resolve an issue. Well, you can use MobileIron Insight to manage your MobileIron core from anywhere, provided you have an iPad or an iPhone. And by the way, that DJ Phantom 4 is not included with MobileIron Insight, but I did hear rumors that there may be a drone available to win during the conference. So to wrap up, part of the key thoughts that I want to share with you are automation and being proactive. So while it may be painful to get to that point to automate and implement some of these best practices and recommendations, once you're there, then you can work on these higher level initiatives. John, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Just a few more slides, and just adding to that. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about we've talked about pivot, and the pivot comes from one, changing the way you're presenting, the way you're delivering your products and services out to your customers, your employees, and looking at ways to free up your administrators so that they have time to start looking at that. I don't know how many people here actually dedicate one or two or more team members to managing mobile devices within their organizations. So it's growing, so that's a positive sign, but there's still not a broad adoption there, and especially now. And one of the key things, and I don't know, Caryn talked about the Windows 10 release. And one of the key things that I was looking at, and I was very excited about when I was managing those teams, was with Windows 10, it was bringing an opportunity to bring all of the device management under one roof. So I didn't have to deal with having two different things. I had SCCM and had SCCM for server environments. You could shift all that responsibility off and put it on your platform teams, and you can have everything under one roof and manage everything from a unified platform. So that was a really cool thing to look at. But it comes down to, what opportunities you have. Label management, simplifying label management. You don't need to have, a label for each team. You don't need to have, a space for each team. You just got to look at how you want to fragment or how you want to distribute and empower different levels of users to start offloading some of the work in the administrative activities. And then looking at, that frees you up to start looking at where are we going? Where do we want to get to? Like, how much more technology can I bring into this picture and deploy? And that brings back to the strategy and how are you going to sell that? And ultimately, you've got that component and you've got that shift on how IT interacts with the business. The trusted advisor notion, the putting on your marketing / sales hat and start to selling what IT is capable of versus catching it when they go out and find it on their own. So there's one or two more slides here. This one is resources. You guys are going to get copies of this slide. I think next week they're going to be posted. There's a few other sources out there, best practices that we've got online. And there's also a few other sessions in here that are going on. You saw a little bit about the DEP in the slide there. There's a specific session about Windows 10. There's a key one there at the bottom, centralized monitoring. Anyone who manages Centuries and gets on those phone calls and say, well, why didn't I know my exchange didn't tell me it wasn't going to give me email today? Go to that session. We've got some better monitoring finally in MobileIron. I know that, when I was a customer, that was one thing I was like, when is it coming? It's coming. It's actually, it may actually be out. It's very close,
I don't think
but
so.
that's a good session to
It's
go
a
to.
sneak
Now
peek.
you'll start to get into that position where you can actually, we're not going to monitor your environment, but you're actually going to start getting some better information so that you know ahead of time when you're going to get that call from the CIO or the CEO that says, hey, I'm traveling and my mail stopped working. So good sessions ahead for you this week. And if there's any questions, I know we just ran over our hour, so we'll stand on the side here and answer some questions if you've got any. And also we'll be at the answers bar throughout the week as well. All right. Thank you, everybody.